Welcome back to the Hard and Hustle podcast for our next guest, Miss Angela. How you doing today, madam?
I am doing great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. I say madam, and I think somebody told me don't call me madam. There was a story behind, so I'm gonna say ma'am, okay? Because I still haven't went back and read this madam thing, but I do want to kind of go back in time and talk about some of the things you mentioned to me when we first got on the call. Was I was that little girl that was asking too many questions in Sunday school. Turns out that's exactly what the boardroom needed. So, can you tell us a little bit of what you're doing today, Angela?
So currently, I serve as the Chief of Staff for the Detroit Parent Network, Chief of Staff and Operations for Detroit Parent Network, a nonprofit in the city of Detroit that focuses on parent and parent voice. Our goal is to create parents that are champions for their children. Intrinsically, we believe that parents are the experts concerning their children. And we're doing that work now throughout the entire states around Powerful Parents of Michigan. How do we harness the power of parents to
Mhm.
make collective voice regarding legislation and policy that impact our children and our families?
I love that. And before that, you had a history of its own. Like you told me this, I'm like, okay, great. And then you said, but before this, and then I'm also getting this. You're in school to get a what?
PhD,
Let's
PhD in
go.
education. My focus is higher adult and lifelong learning. I'm at the great institution, Michigan State University, and learning and growing every day. So I shared with you that my trajectory in learning has not been conventional, right? I took
Hmm.
time off, returned to education after raising children, followed up with getting, several degrees around the way. Advocate of community colleges for that sole purpose and reason. It's been an integral part of my journey. So shout out to my community college in the city, the great city of Flint, Michigan, where I hail from and reside currently.
I love it. And you mentioned Flint. You don't grow up in Flint and walk away without a sense of justice, right? Or a calling to do
Baby,
something about it. So you
no.
went back to Flint. You've been. Did you ever leave actually?
I did. So I had
Okay,
an
okay.
opportunity to live in Virginia Beach, and I lived in London for 4 years, and lived abroad and things like that. But Flint is where I hail from. It is the pulse for
How do you
me.
think
If you can
growing up?
survive in Flint, you can survive anywhere.
Okay, so let's talk about it. How did growing up in Flint actually shape how you kind of see the system today?
So, Flint, much like many cities, have gone through transitions, especially when industry is rooted in one dominant,
Hmm.
force. And so, of course, it being a GM town, our claim to fame is we put the world on wheels, and that didn't begin with
Okay.
cars, right? It began with carriages, and so we're a city of resilience, a city of innovation, a
Hmm.
city that has had its challenges, but a city that has always really centered community. The community school model began in the city of Flint. Many
Yeah.
innovations come from Flint. And so, like others that are from here, I come from a place of resilience and creativity, and nothing can stop us when we put our mind to a thing.
I love that creativity. Look at the tree behind you. Come on, for those that are watching
Right,
the
right,
video, look at this tree. I
creativity.
love it.
Yes.
Um,
I will say that. So let me situate this because I
yeah.
do believe that it's important to bring all facets of yourself, your intersections, into spaces. I'm also a local minister. I've been in ministry for 28 years, doing work in community. My focus has really been servicing families that may be in crisis or are in desperate need of resources of all kinds. So whether it's housing, food security, emotional support, mental supports,
Mhm.
medical supports. So I bring that to the work that I do. It very much steers and acts as a North Star and a compass for me. My faith is definitely a driving force in everything I touch.
I love it. And we can really talk about that because you traded corporate world success, right? Success at that to community work and advocacy. What made you want to go down that, path?
Well, I was doing this thing where I was like leading with my heart in
Mhm.
some work, right, in local faith-based structures and serving community there. But professionally, I was selling widgets and gizmos, potions and lotions, right, and had seen success in that for over 20 some odd years. A turning point for me is, in the grind of selling the things and hitting the bottom line and making the numbers. Both my children were launched off to college, and I remember lecturing my son on the way to school about doing better in school, so he could achieve better. And he said, "Mom, you never finished college, and you did quite well, right?" And so at that point, I, had to walk the talk.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
I went back to community college at the time. I think I was 40 years old. I had been disconnected from learning about 20 some years or whatever. And began to really say, what are the things that I'm passionate about? And it was driving efficient businesses, being highly successful, harnessing resources, and driving
Mhm.
production and efficiency. And I brought that acumen, though, into the nonprofit space with the same zeal and passion, knowing that if we can be more efficient in our nonprofit spaces, if we can harness our resources in a way to have greater impact, then we can touch more people. So I'm very much interested in systems change work, right? How do we, from a micro lens, create better environments so that more families can be successful in the long run? But on a micro lens, like I like the human touch and I like to know that what we're doing makes a difference for everyday folks. So that for me, that conversation with my son allowed me to pivot my focus and really take the learnings that I had experienced in the for-profit sector to say, how can I take experientially what I've learned,
Mm.
take the business acumen that I'm gaining in college settings, and then harness the power of community to drive better outcomes for people. And this is to me the work that matters. It's the work that doesn't shut
Yeah.
off at 5 p.m. It's the work that in the grocery store or, when I'm at the gas station, I'm running into folks and I really want to be a conduit for the power of God, first and
Yep.
foremost, but also for the power of community and connection.
You said so much in that one little, situation of this conversation we're about to have. And I really want to break down. You mentioned learning from your son. So many people feel that he can't learn from someone younger than them, someone that hasn't lived life like them. But you learn from that moment, right? Another thing you mentioned is walking the walk. Walking,
Yeah.
say whatever you're saying that you're actually doing that yourself. And I remember that I was 30 years old when I'm telling my daughter, use your voice, speak up. But I didn't do that for 30 years.
Mm.
And I remember my mom, something that just triggered me and just kind of shut me off. And I'm an adult now. I just don't have to pick up your phone call. Like that's just what it looks like now. And I remember thinking to myself, you know what? I have to have that conversation with her because I'm asking my daughter to be, to use her voice and to speak up. But if I haven't done that in 30 years,
Yeah.
is she really like, what I'm saying? So when you
Yeah.
said that, is I had to do that. The school situation, it's so funny that you say that. So I'm gonna kind of go and I really want to talk about that because I am someone that I have made a career without college. I got
Hmm.
like two classes left to get an associate's degree.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I've opened up businesses. I am a president of a foundation. I have my own company. What is and the only reason I want to finish is to when I tell my kids, you have options. Dad
Yes.
did this and dad did this. Don't you sit here and be less
Yeah.
than, right? Don't be less than.
Right.
What is your thoughts though on that? When your son is saying, "Oh, finish college," did your mind go into that space? Like, wait a minute, I gotta let him know that you got options.
Yeah. And so I think that, like, as parents, right, we lean passionately on the lessons we've learned, and we don't want our children to take the hard road to learn those lessons,
Mhm.
right? So let me give you the cheat codes. College is not the do all be all, right? So there's this whole conversation now, is college even relevant, right?
Mhm.
Is it worth the investment? And I would say, like, that's a very individual question that people have to grapple with. But in talking to my son, who's black male, coming up in this world, and
Mhm.
I'm like, I want you to have options. I want you to be able to choose what doors to go through. And the reality is, yes, I was making good money. I was taking care of my children, but there were some doors I could not go through because I didn't
Mhm.
have those credentials. And so my thing was, never again would a person be able to tell me you're not qualified.
Yeah,
Could I have done the job without the college degree? Absolutely.
absolutely.
I had the
Mhm.
experience, I knew what to do. I was far better suited. But there was language that I didn't have because I wasn't in formal settings, in which when I showed up in the room, I needed to be able to code switch. I'm quoting Dubois here, code switch in a way that they knew I knew what I was talking about,
Mm.
not just experientially, but academically. So let me give you the methodology. Let me give you the framework. Let me give you the context that validates my experience in these spaces. And you can no longer say, like, oh, we'd love to bring you on, but you just didn't meet the credentials. Because I got letters behind my name all day
Yeah,
long
yeah,
now. Like, so we're not playing with that.
yeah,
That
yeah.
take that off the table. And I do think, like in this whole world right now, when we talk about people being qualified and the removal of DEI and all of these things, right? People of color have to be sure that we show up in a way that does not allow folks to eliminate us from the conversation or the selection process.
You going somewhere with this? Let me just explain to you what happened here. Okay, I was this 19-year-old kid working at a Subway. I spent 8 years there out of high school, and I wanted to do more, obviously, and I did great for the company. 8 years, I was running $1 million store. Any new store they wanted me to open, any manager struggling, I was the guy. I'm young, 27 years old, and I wanted to do more. And I remember being overlooked time and time again, right? And it was because I didn't have that piece of paper. So someone that came in had no restaurant business experience at all,
Yep.
got the job because of the piece of paper. But I knew that I ran circles around this guy,
Yeah.
right? And it bothered me because I'm like, man, just because this man understands black and white, he don't understand people. He don't know what it looked like to get here. He don't understand struggles. And then you put me in the hood, I understood that. That's why I
Yeah.
succeeded,
Yeah.
right? I didn't need a degree to succeed in the hood. So yes, I do believe that sometimes because we don't have, to me, no disrespect to you,
Mm-hmm.
Angela, this piece of paper that we often get overlooked because
Absolutely.
of color, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
So it's and you're also a woman in this space makes it a
Yeah.
little bit difficult. Do you feel like that was also something that was kind of holding you back in a sense?
Absolutely. I think being a black woman, right, showing up in spaces, being very vocal, being prone to ask hard questions, very unapologetic in how I show up in my identity, and very quick to disrupt a conversation when I feel as though we're not being fair or being equitable, that we're being biased in our approach, and we have these subtleties in how we make decisions, right? So being willing to interrupt those in spaces, I will say that I think my academic background and experiential background allowed me to have conversations that would not otherwise be tolerated, right?
Mm,
So that there's that. You mentioned people having these academic backgrounds, right? You got paper, right? You have degrees, but you don't know how to talk to folks. And you particularly don't know how to talk to folks in our communities
hmm.
where you're making money and receiving funding to support our communities,
Yeah, yeah.
right? So I think that's critically important too, to know that there is a way of knowing, right, that transcends degrees, right? There are cultural competencies a lot of times that people may miss or don't know, and there are community competencies that are often underlooked, even in how we engage one another.
Hmm.
And we're quick to study that when we go to other countries, right? I just came
Yeah.
from Japan, right? They bow. That is their culture. There's a culture of respect. On public transportation, they respect silence because that is their culture. But we will take a 10-minute ride into another community and not take the time and diligence to understand the nuances of that culture, what respect looks like,
Hmm.
what honor looks like, how to engage folks. And I do find the same context that shows up in the educational settings when we talk about how parents are showing up in space, and if their voices are not just welcome and engaged, but if they're honored and respected.
If the Heart and Hustle podcast has ever sparked any idea or made you think differently, do us a favor. Make sure to guys share this, post it on LinkedIn, or even text that nonprofit friend that you just have. Whatever works, this is what keeps the conversation going and allows us to just grow this community together. Seriously, we appreciate you. Mm. You mentioned some, I wish other people can visit other countries because I think I learned a lot as well when I went to South Africa and
Mm-hmm.
realized the way that they were living out there. And the respect for them was huge, right? In a class setting, they told each other to be quiet. I didn't have to tell nobody to be quiet because, hey, someone's up there trying to educate us. Why are you talking? That
Mm-hmm.
doesn't happen here in America. I've taught here adults in America that will still talk, amongst each other and it's like, where's the respect factor? The way that the upbringing becomes very different for a lot of us. I love everything that you mentioned. And what does it mean to be what you needed? when you were younger. I think you're in the space of really, being, that's what we do. You mentioned a little bit of it doesn't, it's not work, right? No, because it's purpose, it's
Yeah.
passion. We're not doing this for the paycheck. You mentioned you were doing great in the corporate world. You didn't need the PhD to go make more money. You were making great money. But out of the passion, out of the purpose, you want to make sure that you have everything needed to continue to help others. What does that mean to you?
Oh, so even when you mentioned like the PhD, because I had a lot of friends who were like, "Why would you do that? Like, that's not going to pay off, especially at your age." Now, I might look young, but I'm 55, right?
Come on now.
So to be going back to school, and I didn't get my first associate's till I was 42, my bachelor's at 44, right? My master's
Wow.
at like 46. So for me to continue education, some people are like, at this point, it's not even going to pan out. Like,
Yeah.
why would you continue to invest in that? It's a call, right? And
Yeah.
I do believe that there is a pursuit, right, that we have to be tuned into and aligned with. That, like, what is the thing that you're supposed to be doing in this season, and that's very unique, right? And how are you supposed to serve in that thing? But for me, part of that comes from being, like you mentioned,
Hmm.
younger and learning to have my voice, learning to show up in space, learning to be a voice for those who have yet to find their own voice. And so that for me, like when you show up as the person you would have needed as a young person living in poverty, with role models that didn't necessarily look like me or take me along the journey. I
Hmm.
can't say that I saw or had in my life any Black woman that was sitting in a C-suite office that could say, okay, baby, this is how you're going to handle those racial aggressions that
Yeah.
show. Or this is how you're going to respond when someone calls you an angry Black woman, right? Because you're demanding excellence
Hmm.
and you won't settle or sacrifice the standard that you have personally for the standard of the organization, right? So, not having have had that, I do a lot of mentoring. I spend time with women in church, but also at the community college and professionally, because I don't want women to have to bump their heads the way I have. And I
Hmm.
know it's not easy. Like, it can be difficult. So you really have to find your tribe that maintains excellence regardless of race or sex or preferences. But also, like, where is your tribe of folks that will remind you who you are, that you can do it when everybody else says you're crazy, and that,
Hmm.
right, you have to be able to also look in the mirror and know that, like, there's just some things I'm not willing to compromise on. And
Hmm.
so I think that is critically important, especially for little girls that look like me, that don't know it's possible. But also for little boys, right? White, Black, or indifferent, right? To know that, like, there is a standard that people can reach for regardless of your identity and how you show up.
Yeah. And representation matters. You kind of mentioned that. I actually just had this conversation with my wife. I'm like, I don't know what a man look like. Like I didn't have a father at home. My mom was a single, mom for most of her life. And I didn't have a dad. I was adopted. So I
Hmm.
didn't know what that looked like. I knew what it looked like on the bad side of it,
Yeah.
not showing up, what it did for me, like all these
Yeah.
different things. So people just don't understand it. So when they make the comment of the angry Black woman, it's really passion. Like, and it doesn't even happen to just women of color, but I've experienced something like that where it was like, oh, you're angry, you're letting your emotions get to it, and I just laugh. I'm like, bro, it's passion, but you won't understand it, right? I'm just
Yeah.
passionate about the work that I do.
Yeah.
Anything, and that's the crazy. That anything that we do, I can imagine, Angela, for you, you're giving it 110%. You know,
Yeah.
because why not? Like that's
I'm
just
full throttle all the
yeah,
time.
why
Like,
not? I
it's
can't
just
do
who
anything
I am, right?
half-ass, to be
Yeah.
quite frank.
We either
Uh,
going hard or we're not going.
yeah, you're
Like,
saying so many different things, man. But I want to kind of also just back to the degree. No degrees required when it comes to being a parent,
hmm,
right? But parents are the expert when it comes to their kids. And this is the space,
absolutely.
this is that space that you're in. And you mentioned that was your words. What makes Detroit Parent Network's approach different from any other typical parent engagement models, you think?
So a lot of times, and I'm gonna talk smack here, but sometimes what we see in systems, right? We
Mhm.
talk about parent engagement. And what we mean about parent engagement is the school will have parent night, right? And the school will quote unquote engage parents. But in that context, it's usually a power dynamic at play. They're saying when and how and what they expect when a parent engages with that system.
Hmm.
And our motto is really not engagement, it's embracement. It is co-creating space together where power differentials are leveled, right? And so we open up our space, or we'll come in, we do programming to really create a culture where it really is community based, and that I don't care if the parent shows up in the bonnet and the house shoes, right?
She
And
showed
if
up.
the parent
Yeah.
shows up and they are angry, right? Because let's be honest, some things we should be angry about, right? Anger is not a bad thing. Like, it's an emotional, if we have emotional intelligence, we can embrace all of our emotions and we can hold space, and there are ways to process them. So if a parent shows up and they are angry because they feel or perceive that either they're being disenfranchised or their child is being disenfranchised, like, what parent should be calm if you feel like your child is being abused or
Yeah.
neglected? Nobody, right? So how do we hold space for that? And so what we're interested in doing is really raising the voice of parents, right? We do provide some training and some support, especially because we're not going to the Capitol hollering on the front lawn. Like, we're
Yeah.
coming in with a very clear problem statement, with identified solutions, and we're going to legislators with ask, right? So we want out of school time supported. Why? Because we know when parents have a safe place for their children to go, then parents can work.
Hmm.
Early child care is critically important. Why? Because if parents, in most communities, right, children age 0 to 5 are the most impoverished in any community, right? Those parents don't have resources, oftentimes because child care is an issue. If we can put children in early learning settings, the research shows that children that start in high quality programming early, we can recalibrate some of the losses that we've had. And those children show up stronger when
Hmm.
they emerge for kindergarten, and they do better by the third grade with their reading and proficiencies, right? So there's research that goes to support some of these programs if we can standardize the level of quality and support that we provide amongst communities.
Do you feel like there's a story that really captures why this work really matters? I mean, everything that you mentioned, right? The work matters.
Mm-hmm.
Those
Oh, it's my
conversations.
life. I mean, for me, the story is me, right? It is the experience I had as a child in the city of Flint, right? Growing up impoverished. My parents divorced when I was about 12. And, just seeing my mom struggle. I was the oldest of three children. So I was paternalized, meaning I had to take on a parental role with my siblings who were younger than me because my mom had to work. She had to
Yeah.
commute for working, right? So all of the things that I'm talking about, like solid out of school programming that focus on academic supports and social emotional learning, right? Because when we provide safe spaces for our kids, then our kids are not jeopardized, right? We're not
Mhm.
leaving them alone in the afternoon, subject to all of the things that happen in our communities, right? That can be counterproductive to children being successful and safe.
Mhm.
So that's my, again, my why
Yeah.
shows up because it's becoming the things I needed and creating the settings that I want my grandchildren to have.
You're saying so many things. Like, I feel like I'm having a therapy session here with you today because you're saying things. I'm like, you know what?
That's
That
the
is so
pastor in me.
true.
Like,
That is
come
so
on, let's
true.
talk about it.
When you said, having to take care your younger siblings,
Mhm.
like how old? Like how younger? Like a year, 2 years?
Oh, so I have a brother that's 3 years old, younger and 5 years younger,
Okay.
right?
So I kind of had the same experience. Like I couldn't play sports because I
Hmm.
had to make sure my sister that was 2 years younger than me got home because she didn't want to listen at times.
Yes.
And I didn't think about it, but a lot of people, when then I moved out my house, and my friends always says, "Man, you act like a dad," and even now, right? But when you said that, I'm like, that's why. Because I
Yes.
was forced to do that when I was young. I had to make sure my sister did what she had to do. I had to make sure my brother was doing his duties, plus had to do my own duties, right? Like I couldn't sometimes live the life as a young kid and do things that a young kid would do because I had to damn near play dad. And no disrespect,
Yeah.
my mom, she had two jobs. There were 7 kids at home, all these different things. So when you say that, it also kind of like, man, that's where that comes from. Not a bad thing, right? Because I think to
Yeah.
me, it's been beneficial for me in my life, in the way that I am now a father. But yeah, that's when you said that, I'm like, wow,
But
that's
if I was going to probe, I would challenge that you probably don't know how to rest and play very well, right? Because
rest.
when
Oh no.
rest,
Yes.
right? Because we feel guilty, right? Because we didn't learn to rest as children.
Wait a
Because you
minute,
were,
you say some stuff, Angela.
it's
I don't take
real.
naps. I tell people I don't take naps because it frustrates me. If I take a nap and it's too long, I'm like, oh my God, what? I can't believe. You know how
Yeah.
many minutes I lost? What I could have done in 30 minutes or an hour. So it's funny you say that because I do not rest. You all right?
Rest is resilience, though,
Yeah.
and it's revolution, right? So there is a rest. Like when people say, "What are you doing?" You're like, "Oh, I'm doing nothing." No, rest is a thing. Like it is necessary, and you will be more effective and powerful when you rest well, right? So it's like, but I've had to reframe this because when you're always on, always caring for other people, there's a guilt that comes in when you have to care for yourself. And our parents feel that, right? Many parents feel like, I got to make the ends meet. I got to grind. I got to do this. But how many of us know that, like, taking that time on the floor with your kid, right? That half an hour, that hour, whether you're coloring, you're playing Uno, whatever the thing is, like that to your child
Yeah.
is as soothing and
That's
therapeutic as going over like all of their spelling words.
I would say that's one thing that I do like play. My wife is like, I can never get down on the floor like you do. And I sit here and I go into voices. But that was the creative side of me. There were 7 kids. I was in a room with no TV, so I had to
Mm.
get creative. There was times we didn't have any, so you better get creative. So I did have this creativity mind. So when I talk to my daughter, like we'll play characters all day in the voices, and I see her now doing it. But it's because I had to learn how to play with myself, in a sense, right?
Yeah.
I had to figure out what that actually looked like. There were so many times I was just in a room and with nothing to do. So I was drawing, I'm listening to music, I'm all these different things. So for sure, the resting, I don't know what rest is. The playing, yeah, for sure. I cannot just stand still. So I'm gonna figure something out. So,
Hmm.
but I'm also very intentional when I see because the phones could be one of those things that stop you from playing. And
Yes.
sometimes I got to remember to, you know what, this is not important. Take that hour.
Put it down. Yeah.
Take that 30 minutes and play. With them, it makes a complete difference. Again, I don't know what it looked like to be a father, but it makes sense to me. At the end
Hmm.
of the day, when a kid can see that no, you could put something down and give them that time. We're asking them when they're watching TV, when they're playing, look at me. Why
Yeah.
can't we do the same thing for them? Right? We're showing these people. They're watching our moves. When we
Yeah.
ask why do they do that? Well, you should actually ask yourself, am I doing this? Like, where's this coming from? Where are they learning these things from? It becomes a repeated cycle. You done broke cycles, right?
Yeah. Because
Uh, uh,
most of behavior is learned, though,
yeah, 100%. I
right?
do agree.
But we can always learn. That's the beauty, right? As long as we got breath in the body, we can learn to do things differently. And in
Mhm.
this world now, there's so much information, right? To your point, like I didn't know what a dad was. But maybe you didn't see what it was because you were supposed to create a model that you had never seen,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
so the model that you create for your children, right, is something that they'll see in a way which is probably more impactful than them seeing the dysfunction,
Correct.
right, that you were exposed to previously. Because now you're intentionally creating a model in front of them.
Yep, yep. I
Yeah.
heard this, and I can imagine you can agree with this, Angela. When I heard this, I'm like, I'm running with this for the rest of my life. That God will test you to provide a testimony, right? So,
Absolutely.
so when we're talking about just not having all these things, it was testing our lives to share this testimony with your son, right?
Yeah.
With my own kids, with people out. You
Yeah.
mentioned how you serve people, right? When we share this, it don't even got to be our story. It could be somebody else's testimony. It allows people to see I'm not alone in this world.
Yeah.
Like, so yes, I believe that life was giving to me as a test to me to provide this testimony to help others break cycles. One, to show what fathers actually look like, but also
Mm-hmm.
to be representation. There's not a lot of Latinos in this space, right? But there's
Mm-hmm.
also not a lot of males in this space when we talk about mentorship. And that's the reason that I really go back and do the work. It is very purpose driven. It's not so much. I didn't even have kids, and I was already volunteering at my old high school. I
Well,
didn't even
you
have.
were parenting early, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
caring for others is not abnormal for you,
Yeah.
right? You learn to care.
Yeah, yeah. This is
Yeah.
so good. I'm loving this conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
When we think about communities don't need more funding announcements, they just need funding to actually show up. We're in a space now where funding is actually being
Ooh.
slashed left and right, right? So what do you see go wrong when we have well-intentional programs? Do you see that we put programs in place and then take fundings? Like what are you seeing, especially in Michigan area?
Yeah. So it's first let me just acknowledge it is so hard out here in these nonprofit streets right now, right?
Mm,
It is thuggish, ruggish out here in these streets right now. And I say that with a smile because what I really believe intrinsically, like funding is important, don't get me wrong. It is critically important. What I have seen with people of color is that we find a way, right? And when I mean we find a way, because the answer is always us.
Mm-hmm.
It's never the funding. We need the money to do the things. But there have been times in this country where we have crowdsourced funds to create schools, to educate our kids, because it was important, even when it was illegal, right? So we've never been a people to wait on law to validate or justify what we're going to do for our people, for our children, or for our community. Now, in the current climate, I think that the dynamic is that we've had great programs that have been funded. And because of the change in administration, you see priorities shift. You see things being defunded. I'm really concerned right now with the backlash on any program that has been targeted for equity work, right? So the removal of the term equity, the defunding of anything that has Black or Latina or Indigenous in the title, right? Just because of the title itself, those programs have been slashed or cut. And I think that's very problematic. It is, it is what they call white lash, right? It is the backlash against anything, any programs that have been slated to really show equity and level fields. So I'm very concerned about that. I'm curious how we will respond. But what I do know is that the power of our collective voice, when we're focused on a thing, I do believe that there's been just enough prosperity to keep us apart.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I got my funding. Hope you get yours in this competitive space. While that's removed, what happens is we come together because we only have us. And we
Correct.
got to figure this out. So how do we collaborate stronger? How do we rally and align our resources to have greater impact? And that has always been our secret sauce. As minorities across this nation, it is the thing that we do well. Unfortunately, it usually takes hard times to bring us to that point of community and humility to rally together instead of it to be the crabs in the
Yeah.
barrel, kind of stepping on each other to get to the top.
Yeah, and it's been like you mentioned, it's just kind of been like that for some time, right? But
Mhm.
we've seen our country come together in
Yeah.
times, right? I mean, the pandemic, we've seen the country come together.
But it
Uh,
usually takes that crisis, and I hate to say that, and I think we're there. Like when we looked at what happened with SNAP benefits, right?
mhm,
And we're saying in a nation like ours, are we really okay with kids being hungry? Like we really
mhm,
like, and that righteous indignation has to rise up so that people are saying, yeah, we're not doing that. We may do a lot of things. We may sacrifice a lot of things, but our kids being hungry and homeless should never be on the table, regardless. Because, like, you might
yeah,
argue over adult homelessness, right?
yeah,
People could say, oh, well, you might have a substance abuse problem, and maybe that's your fault because of the choices you made. But when we look at children in this country, no child
mhm.
born, regardless of the zip code they're born in, should be laid on the altar of political angst and turmoil between parties. That should just never be acceptable.
Yeah. Nah, I definitely agree. How do you continue to challenge these systems without actually getting shut out of them? I think that's also big, especially when there's other leaders watching you and seeing that they want to be in this space, but they don't want to get shut out of these rooms.
Yeah, I think you have to lean in on what we agree with, right? Commonly, when I talk
Hmm.
about, we can agree that all kids should be healthy.
Hmm.
We can agree that all kids should have food and access to learning, right? And so I think you lean in on the things that really matter where you have commonality. To change a system, you have to be the cog inside the system. And this is what's hard for me, right? Because I would just as soon walk away from the table because I can work in my church setting. We can do prevention, right, in the church setting, but in order to bring correction, you have to be a part of that system.
Hmm.
And many of the folks who are in those systems get exhausted. They get tired. Some people do get pushed out, right? Because it's difficult to always speak the truth to oppression.
I love it. We've been having a pretty good conversation, and people got really got to go back and take all the gems that really been giving out, but really talking realistically what's happening in our own country. I actually seen an organization here in Florida, Central Florida, that was an organization around young women get shut down after 30 years because of funding. So it's something that's
Mhm.
happening, and some people may not feel that impact, but it's happening. Snap. So many people felt that impact, throughout the country, and just because you're not experiencing it doesn't mean that it's not happening, right? So
Yeah,
you're
and
gonna
I
take.
think we have to be intentional and targeted about where we're giving individually, right? If you like, even though like I'm not able to write checks with zeros in or 6 zeros on the end, right, as a
Mhm.
donation, but I am very intentional of the organizations that I support every month. $20 here, $50 there, right? How are we showing up with our dollar? Because that generosity has to come from us. And if we have a swell of grassroots folks who are given $10, right? We can support the things that matter to us. But
Mhm.
we have to rally not just our voice, we have to rally our resources to support those things.
I was going to say that because sometimes it's not even the dollars. Like one of the biggest things as leading the organization that I'm with today, it's like, listen, if we have to bring 100 people in the room, even if they didn't pay for a ticket, but we could have the ability to bring 100 people in a room, bring them into a room because there's so many resources. There are people that
Yeah.
know people, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes they don't even know the mission. Sometimes they don't know the why. Sometimes they don't know the person behind the why, right? And when you get to learn that, you get to tell that story, people resonate with that. Like you
Yeah.
mentioned, we all could agree that kids shouldn't go to homelessness, you know, and when you get to speak and someone gets to see that leader, and this is what we're doing, and this is how we're utilizing it, that you'll see so much change. So sometimes it's not, as you mentioned, it's not just the money. It's
Yeah.
you also just showing up,
Yeah.
right? And
And
fighting for
being a
what's right.
champion, right?
Yeah.
And really lifting up like, hey, these folks are doing great work over here. And then when we do have an opportunity at the table to bring folks in, how do we leverage that social
Hmm.
capital, right? To bring folks into spaces where we can contract or where we can show benevolence and where we can elevate and amplify the voice of the work that's happening.
Love it. I actually just last question before we get into, kind of like the end of the blind question, my favorite time. What do schools get wrong about cultural parenting norms and how do we fix that? Because I went to a school that was, I would say, majority white, right? There was
Mhm.
some diversity there. We were all bussed in from the small areas around this community. But I would say that I had teachers that looked at me saying I was a bad kid when life was happening at home.
Yeah,
Mentioned the sexual
absolutely.
abuse. I mentioned the adoption, the feeling alone, the feeling not seen, all these different things. But then I had some teachers that realized I wasn't a bad kid, but there was something deeper than that.
Mhm.
What do you got to say on schools and how they're getting it wrong?
I think for many schools, right? Let me just say, they the educators in those spaces are there generally with the best of intentions, right?
Mhm.
Because they ain't making a lot of money usually. Like they're not going in there saying, "Hey, let me harm these kids,"
Mhm. Mhm.
let me be a further burden to the lives of these children. So I do believe that the intention is often pure,
Mhm.
led into those spaces. I think that educators are bogged down. They're overtaxed and under resourced, and so in that space they show up with bias. And in our bias, we expect things to be similar,
Mhm.
right? So the way I work with Jimmy should work with Johnny because it worked with Jimmy, right? And so I think by default, there is a process with which educators show up that sometimes does not value the unique creativity of each child. And that is difficult. It's difficult when you're providing instruction, but it's
Mhm.
also difficult when you're dealing with behavioral or social issues, right? So, to your point, if I'm a kid that we slept in our car last night, right, and I'm showing up in your class and I'm half asleep or I'm angry, I'm anxious, I'm agitated, but we slept in our car last night, right? As the teacher in that space, you're like, I need you to get this done, and this is the timeline. Not seeing the individual because you got 20 or 25 individuals in a class. So I think a lot of times it's the way we structure these settings that
Mhm.
don't really allow for the interaction that is responsive to the individual in these settings. So what does that look like? Sometimes it's small groups, it's having parapros, it's having co-teaching models in place that allow for some adaptability both in the instruction but also the class management.
Okay. All right. All right. We're getting somewhere here.
Yeah.
As we wrap this up, though,
Let me
what?
say this though before we
Yeah.
move on. I'm like you. I was a kid who was bused to a school, right? Because I was quote unquote magnet, right?
Yeah.
So I'm bused to a school that's far more diverse than the neighborhood I come from, right? And so in that setting, the teaching model was different. Like we had these learning centers, and we could move through these learning centers at our own pace, right? So that it wasn't a sit down, listen, don't say anything kind of structure. It was a structure that was more aligned with the way I learned, and the fact that I could move through material quicker because I was a kid in class that I learned really well. I always did well in school, but if I was idle, I would clown. Like I'd be a
Same.
behavioral, I'm
Yeah.
snickering in the back, like all of the things. But so to your point, like not misdiagnosing the brilliance of a child
Yeah.
because they don't show up or move at the pace or the pattern that you expect all of the children to.
Yeah. And I'm a hands-on person.
Yeah.
Like if I can't just sit there and listen, especially if they don't grasp your attention. Like we all attention-wise very different. So yes, I am just like you. I have to be moving. I hate to just be sitting still. I feel like I'm being lazy if I'm just sitting still. Kind of going back to what you mentioned about, rest. Just becomes lazy. Then I love to be that's how I learn. I learn by mistakes, right? By failing. I learn that way. I appreciate learning that way. So many people think when they fail and that they suck or they're not good, but it's not. It's like, what did you learn from that moment to get better
Yeah.
the next time?
Yeah.
So yeah, you hit something on the head. I mean, there's so many different things that you said throughout this that we could really spend so much time dissecting. Angela, we're gonna have to do a part two to this, okay? Because
Okay.
there's so many different things. I'm
That
like,
sounds
wait a
good.
minute. I
I
want to
do
open
want
that
to
door.
pull on this though, what you just said. Like, so we think that like when we learn as kids, the way we learn, and most children are not auditory learners, right?
Yeah.
They may be kinesthetic learners. They need that tactile experience to learn. But those kids grow up and they're adults and they're in the workplace and they still need to learn and grow. But when we have these structures that say, listen to me, do it this way, you don't, it's not experiential and you're not free to fail. Right. So then we have adults in a workplace that same learning structure, same way of being, but I'm no longer 10, I'm 30, I'm 40 in a workplace, but I still need to unharness my creativity. I need some autonomy to be able to make a decision. I need to be able to come back and say, hey, we tried this, but it didn't work. And we need systems and organizations that build in an opportunity to fail even in our everyday work. Like
Hmm.
we tried a program, it didn't work, but here's what we learned, and that's going to inform our next, iteration
Hmm.
of the program. So in manufacturing, they call it like a continuous quality improvement cycle. But we need the same structure for people to learn and grow as adults. And that's what I studied. Like, how do adults learn? How
Yeah.
do adults thrive? And it's usually from experience and reflection.
Hmm. I was a before I got into the left the corporate before I left the corporate world, I was a facilitator for airline industry. First of all, I never thought I'd be facilitating anything, right? Or teaching people, especially adults. Realizing adults are, first of all, a little difficult to teach more than there is kids, right? But when I was up there, and I think why people really enjoyed, not to my own horn, but why people appreciated when I went up there facilitated, because the different learner that I would teach you the PowerPoint and I would demify it, make it make sense is my whole thing. Just make it make sense. Don't use all of these extra words because ideally people don't read past 11th grade, school level. Sometimes even less than that. But I also used to always tell them, listen, if you're not getting it by me teaching it, no worries. We're going to have some hands-on time, and I'd be
Yeah.
more than happy to walk the room
Okay.
because I understood that sometimes this doesn't make any sense back here. What I'm talking about, it's gibberish. We got to get our hands in there, as you mentioned. I got to test it out. I got to do it to realize can I do it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah, I see what you're saying here, but let me do it. And
Yeah.
then I would learn that way. So I was always that, hey, before I say, I know this is gonna make I didn't create this curriculum. I'm gonna try to make it make sense, but we're really going to get some hands-on practice so that we can really make it make sense, right? Like not everyone does that, but it goes back to my experiences as well of the way that I was learning. Not everybody has that. So I do believe that sometimes the experiences of hurt, of trauma, and I'm not saying that it's a good thing, but it ideally has allowed us to be the version of we are today to then continue to help others in their their journey of overcoming adversity. So Angela, I appreciate everything you've done and the things you continue to do. You don't have to, right? Like you mentioned, I'm a, above that 50 mark. I didn't have to go get a degree. I didn't have to go back to school, but you
Yeah.
did it because you realized it wasn't for you. You're not living a selfish life, right?
Yeah.
Is that when you leave here, on God's time, that you leave all these things behind, the
Yeah.
resources, all the
Yeah.
education, all the stories that you're planting seeds, and I can imagine you've planted seeds you didn't even know have been watered by other people.
Mm.
Like that's just what life looks like. Nowadays, I'm so mindful of the things I tell somebody because they can take that and run with it. And
Yeah.
sometimes not what we meant, and sometimes we were in the moment that we weren't ourselves, and they took that. We
Ooh.
gotta be very mindful, right? So,
Yeah.
Angela, I had such a good conversation. But actually, last question right here.
Okay.
Um, what has you think your kids have taught you about leadership? Because there's something to learn everywhere, right? And I
Ooh.
think there's a lot to me. I'm learning patience right now. I think
Mm.
but what do you think when it comes to leader that your kids have taught you?
I think one of the greatest lessons I've got from my children is that it all matters, right? That they are always watching, even when it doesn't seem like they're listening,
Hmm.
and that it all matters. The failures are critically important, right? That as parents, that we share our failures, that we share our learnings with our children along the way. And because not just because they need to know our stuff, but I think because when they do fail, they can realize that you can get back up and that failure can be turned into something beautiful. Like there can be beauty for ashes, even when we
Hmm.
get it wrong. And
Hmm.
so, that's been important for me with my children, and that I have to have times when we just play. Like you mentioned, even with, so my kids are like 37 and 35, but we go on cruises, we take a 3-day weekend and we just play. And that is not, I'm past the stage where I'm raising them. They're grown, they're
Yeah.
fully formed adults, but it's still important that I'm able to engage with them,
Yeah.
right, in their identities as themselves, not just my kids. And that they get to experience me, not just as their mom, but as myself. And
Mm.
that's really important because when your kids are grown, they spend time with you because they want to.
Yeah.
When they're young, they have to.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
they're grown, they spend time with you because they want to. And it's a gift.
Mic drop. No, I appreciate you, Angela. Where can people find more information of what you guys are doing in Flint, Michigan? What is the website? Are you personally on LinkedIn? So if people want to talk to you personally.
Absolutely. I'm on LinkedIn, Angela Hood, and the website is DetroitParentNetwork.org.
I love it. Well, guys, my name's Ephraim. This is Angela. We'll catch you guys on the next episode. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment so you can see some more of these conversations. Angela, we thank you. Laters.
Thank you.